Hello and welcome to another national overview for Dominion 6. In this part we're going to go over Early Age Ur. I apologise if the nations I'm covering seem a little random and all over the place, but I'm trying to focus on nations that I have more multiplayer experience with, or ones that I play in my own time quite a bit. I am however doing more research into the newer nations, specifically EA, Pyrene, Muspelheim, and obviously Middle Age Nidhogangr, and once I have my thoughts together on those nations I'll be putting them up too. Early Age Ur is an interesting nation, centred around the Enkidus. They take a great amount of inspiration from the Epic of Gilgamesh and Sumerian beliefs, being named after Enkidu, and take the idea of wild men creating their first city, in this case the city of Ur. The Enkidu are a race of half-giants at size 5 with a racial preference for Heat 1 and a racial aversion for hats. They have lots of foreign recruitment and terrain-based recruitment with strong priests and get good access to nature, earth, water, and air, and a little bit of death. The Pretender of Ur also doesn't lose any of their magic paths when they die and being recalled, but we'll cover more on that later. They also additionally have an order limit of +1 and a heat limit of +1. Alright, so let's talk units. So your units are based on either the Enkidu or the Kulullu people. They're size 5 with fairly high hit points and strength and above average magic resistance as a whole, and a natural protection of 2 for most of your units that covers their body parts. Most of your units do not wear head protection, or if they do, they're simply crowns or slight hats. So fighting larger units than them, enemies that are using things like Stonebird or spells such as Rain as Stones, or simply just being hit in the head will hurt your units quite a lot. This does, however, mean that your commanders make decent enough thugs and your troops are efficient buff holders due to their base hit point level and their inherent strength. At size 5 you're only fitting 2 of your units to a square however, so you should be careful of high attack density troops which will harass your lines down fairly easily. So for troops we'll start with the 4 units. The first is the Enkidu soldier. They have high hit points and strength, but low protection and fairly middling stats. They do however do pretty good damage at 20 with their slashing bronze hatchet. And they're fairly cheap and easy to mass, only being 7 resources and 9 recruitment points. They do however cost 16 gold. The Enkidu Spear Guard have better armour with their scale cuirass, and use a bronze spear, which does do less damage than the hatchet, and has less attack skill, but it is piercing damage for better beating armour. They cost more resources than the warriors, but they're the same in the other costs. Your Ur Guard are an up-armoured version of your soldiers. They have attack 12 with their hatchet at 21 slashing damage, and they've got 9 protection from their cuirass, with slightly better defense skill as well. They do cost more in gold and recruitment points, however, than your basic soldiers. They also have a castle defense bonus of 1, which helps keep your walls up for just a little bit longer. The Enkidu Hornblower is a standard bearer, meaning they will increase the morale of units within their squad by 1, as long as there's a hornblower within the squad, which is useful for keeping your units in the fight. They have poor protection defense however, so you should use them more to support your squads rather than be the main battle line. They are also quite costly in terms of gold and recruitment points in comparison to your basic troops, but remember that morale will stop your squad from running quite as easily. Okay, moving on to your capital only troops, you have the Enki's Chosen. These guys have 11 protection thanks to their pretty decent bronze hauberk, which also does give them a body protection of 13, but they still don't wear a hat, so you gotta watch their head. They've got decent attack and defense skill, 13 attack with their bronze hatchet, dealing 21 slashing damage. And they're also bodyguards for your commanders, and they are sacred, so any bless that you have, these guys will take benefit from. Lastly, in your capital, you also have access to the Mushushu, which costs a very high 150 gold for a high HP, size 8 monster that has multiple attacks and also inbuilt fear. They don't have very good defense skill, but they've got pretty decent attack skill and high magic resistance, morale, and protection, especially in comparison to your other troops. You are, however, limited to recruiting 1 per turn, though with their cost that's probably a good thing. They're quite useful to help your expansion through their fear routing effect, hitting independent units. Ur also has additional foreign recruitment from non-forted provinces. The Enkidu is a medium gold but cheap otherwise unit that does a good bit of damage with their club for a basic unit, even if their defense skill and protection is a bit lacking. The Enkidu Archer, however, has a longbow and is a surprisingly decent archer purely from their long range and the high damage on their longbow thanks to their higher than usual strength. They do have average precision, however, and with their low protection they may suffer in archer duels against better protected foes. They will, however, make fantastic use of buffs, which we'll go over in the magic section. Next for your unforted units is the Enkidu Warrior, who again have low protection, but they are fairly cheap, and being reform recruitable in any province without a fort, they can make decent supplements to your troops while you're on campaign. They come in both a stone spear variant and a club variant, as you can see here, and both do decent damage and at least have a shield to help them versus arrows, unlike the usual Enkidu. Additional recruitment can also be done in specifically non-forted swamp provinces. So the Enkidu Hunter is a stealthy berserker with a stone spear and a javelin. They have poor protection, which is helped only slightly by the fact they berserk, as they have berserk +1, but they do make an interesting choice due to their fairly low cost to recruit and the fact they are stealthy, making them a pretty decent choice for raiding, and javelins are obviously quite effective in the early age. Your second unit you can make is the Enkidu Reaver, which is another berserking unit. It does cost quite a lot in recruitment points, but for it comes with very high strength and morale, and is also stealthy, pillaging, and they have berserker +3. This means that when they go berserk, they have a pretty respectable 10 protection and 15 attack skill with their bronze hatchet, and they'll also do a grand total of 25 slashing damage with it. That's very respectable. These guys are giant killers. They are harder to mass due to their recruitment point cost, but they can be very effective raiders and pillagers. Additionally, also can make underwater forts, and in those forts recruit 2 additional troops. The Kulullu are aquatic beings with bronze equipment and no shields. They do, however, give you specialised underwater units, but they're not fantastic other than their combat speed, though they have fairly high strength and they do have bronze equipment, so at least it won't rust. Still, they won't beat out most underwater nations' troops, especially their more elite units. You also have access to the Kulullu Soldier, which is effectively the same, except they have slightly better protection, but again, no hat. Okay, let's move on to commanders. So has some good commander selection, and again, additional foreign recruited commanders and specialised underwater commanders. This is going to take a little while. First, we have the Enkidu Scout. This can also be recruited outside forts, and is slightly more expensive than an independent scout, but does have higher HP and higher map move, as well as forest and mountain survival. They are, however, pretty average in terms of stealth, at only 40 stealth. Even though they're more expensive than independent scouts, the fact that you're able to recruit these from any of your unforted provinces, as well as your capital, is great for getting more information on your neighbours. The Enkidu Elders are cheap troop movers. They have 90 leadership for up to 2 squads, but they have no access to advanced formations, and they have uninspiring -1, which gives them a malice to all troops they command, as we can see here. They are also all old, which does reduce their map move, but they are also tax collectors for getting income from a province they are in, even if it doesn't have connections to a fort, and they are also defence organisers, so they will increase the province defence of the province they are in by 1 per turn. Do note this isn't sped up by having multiple elders in the same province, and they cannot raise the defence in the province higher than 19, but it does mean that your troop carriers will increase your province defence while ferrying troops, which is quite nice for such a cheap commander at only 20 gold. You want to use these guys to move your foreign recruits into your armies, and also for ferrying around large amounts of siege chaff or non-combat troops where you don't really care about the -1 inspirational bonus. Now, the Enkidu commander is your basic commander. They lead up to 2 squads with 75 leadership, and he can lead less troops than the Elder, but he doesn't have the morale penalty. But again, still no access to advanced formations, unfortunately. He again doesn't have a helmet, which is the main weakness, and he has fairly average stats. He is useful for leading supporting forces, but if you can, you want your main armies to be led by an Ensi, if possible. Okay, let's start moving on to your mages. All of your mages, as are, at least the ones recruited above ground, are also priests, so keep that in mind. The Gala is a fairly cheap Nature 1, Holy 1 Sacred that is also a spell singer. They aren't the most useful in combat due to their low pass, only having Nature 1, and they're not great for leading troops at only Leadership 10 and Magical Leadership 10. But they can buff Sacreds for expansion if you're building a bless around that. Where they really shine is as researchers due to their low initial cost and the fact that they are sacred, giving them an upkeep cost over the course of a year of 42 gold. Which isn't that bad. If you had a Gala researching over the course of a full year, they'll produce 84 research points with no modifiers for a cost of 1 gold for every 2 research points, which is a very good deal. Additionally, they have the Elegus modifier, which means that if they are attempting to resurrect your pretender after they have died, they actually count as Holy 3 for the purposes of calling them back. This, coupled with the fact that Ur's god cannot lose magical paths when being called back, means that Ur can actually be quite aggressive with a pretender, with just a few Galas on standby waiting to call them back. Something that could turn the tide in your first war very easily. Moving on, we have the Sal-Me. So the Sal-Me is a Water 1, Nature 1 and Holy 1 mage. They do cost a little bit more than the Gala, but they are good for point buffing your troops, most notably using things like Moss Body, just to make your units a little bit harder to kill. With some gems, they can also give bark skin to a small number of troops in a pinch, and with their water, quickness with some gems for a small number of troops or thugs as well. They will not be your main damage dealers most likely, but they are a cheap and effective buffer and forger, and they can also do quite a good bit of research as well. Now, the Gudus are very good mages. They have Holy 1 with an 100% chance for either Air 2 or Earth 2. Both of which are fantastic buffing paths. Earth 2 opens up Stone Skin or Group Stone Skin with gems for your troops and lets them use Earth Meld to reduce your enemy's defense skill so that your troops can hit them easier. With Earth Boots, obviously they'll become better casters for buffing armies or for rituals. Air, on the other side, innately allows them to cast Mist Form and Gift of Flight on your troops, and most importantly Arrow Ward or Wind Guide with some gems, which will massively reduce the casualties you take due to ranged firepower in your wars. Air Gurus can also Cloud Trapeze, giving you access to a little bit of magic phase attacks, and can innately use Lightning Strike. Gurus will probably make up the majority of your battle mages, as both the air and earth casters are very useful with your troops. Okay, moving on to the Ishib. The Ishib are Water 2 Holy 2s with an 100% chance of getting an extra level in air, nature, or earth. They are more expensive than the Gudu, but they can innately cast Quickness and Gift of Formlessness for your troops, and they have the ability to cast Slow or Crawl to reduce the enemy troops' stats as well. They can also cast Rain with a few gems for use against nations like Abyssia, so keep a couple of these guys in your back pocket. They're also pretty good water elemental summoners, and they can become Water 3s underwater with summon water power, meaning they can fairly effectively fight underwater with them, especially against light enemy forces. With Earth Boots and an Earth Random, they can also call Anzus, one of your national summons, whereas the Nature Randoms can contact Naiads, and the Air Randoms can cast Freezing Mist with a gem, useful for creating large area of effect cold damage. Okay, moving on to your capital, you have two capital-only mages, the Entu and the Ensi, both of which are slow to recruit, and they're also quite costly. So the Entu has Earth 2, Nature 1, Holy 3, with an 100% chance for Air +1, Water +1, Earth +1, or Nature +1. They do have bad leadership, but they are Holy 3 priests for casting things like Divine Blessing, and for doing good banishments if you're fighting against a lot of undead armies. The Air Randoms can cast Rain of Stones with Summon Earth power, again useful to harass your enemies, but only cast this if you air shield your troops, or they will be headbonked to death. Nature Randoms can cast Strength of Gaia with a Nature Gem to improve their ability to Nature cast, which will then unlock Howl, which is good for breaking up enemy forces. Water Randoms gives you another Moss Body caster, but most importantly, with a Thistle Mace and Nature Gems, they can get you into Foul Vapors territory, with the use of Strength of Gaia as well. Which is good because with your massed amount of nature mages, you can very easily increase the poison resistance of your troops so you can outlast the enemy within it. The Earth Randoms are powerful Earth mages. They get Earth 4 with Summon Earth power in battle, or 5 with that and Earth Boots. This gives you very easy access to large battle-wide buffs and using Petrify for use against enemy thugs. Moving on to the Ensi are Water 2, Nature 1, Holy 3 mages, with an 100% chance in getting an extra level in Air, Water, Earth, or Nature. These guys have very good leadership 100, giving you access to advanced formations for up to 3 squads, and they have an additional Inspirational +1. They're the best leaders you have access to in Recruitment. The Nature Randoms can cast Foul Vapor, same as the Ensi, and are great for using Bone Melter with some additional Water Gems. The Water Randoms give you level 3 mages for summons and for casting water elementals. The Air Randoms are less useful than the others, but Personal Mistform is never bad, and the Earth Randoms give you access to things like personal buffs like Temper Flesh or Iron Skin. Okay, so that's all the recruitment you can do in your forts. Now on to foreign recruitment. In non-forted province, you can recruit chiefs. They're able to lead 50 troops, and they also get Beastmaster +1 for higher morale animals. This gives you another commander you can recruit anywhere in order to help ferry your farm recruit troops. In unforted swamps, you can recruit hunter chiefs. These are the commander version of your hunters. They're stealthy berserkers, they're able to leave up to 50 troops, and they're useful for having stealthy raiding attacks if you take them with your other swamp units. Additionally, in swamps, you can also recruit the headhunter. The headhunters are also stealthy raiders that have an inbuilt magical weapon with their skull club, and also berserker +4, making them surprisingly effective against thugs using mist form, because eventually they'll get up to attack skill 17, and they'll be doing 27 magical damage with their skull club. Very, very scary. Additionally, in swamps with labs, you can recruit bone readers. These are level 1 earth and death mages with an 100% chance of +1 water, earth, or death. Though they do take 2 turns to recruit because they take 2 commander points. They are slight fortune tellers that are also stealthy, but they are bad at researching. These are your only reliable death mages that you can recruit nationally, but they also have the chance of getting death too, which will unlock more death for your nation through use of things like skull staffs and summons, and also giving you morale plays through things like terror. Water randoms can cast Stygian Rain if you're willing to invest a skull staff on top of an empowerment on, and that is a potentially awesome spell to massively increase your troops' tankiness that your enemies might not be expecting. The earth randoms give you a good buffer, but he's probably the weakest of the 3. Still, with the death access these guys have, they can make good thugs, especially at death 2, as they're able to soul vortex with a death gem. They're pretty tanky, and because they get such good access to the good buffing paths through earth, or water, or death, and on top stealthy, I love these guys. I use these guys all the time in my multiplayer game. It's just a shame that they're 2 turns to recruit. Now, in any non-fort location with a lab, you can also recruit shamans. These are fairly expensive mages, but come with earth 2, nature 3 base, with a guaranteed +1 to water, earth, or nature, and then an additional 10% chance for +1 in water, earth, death, or nature. These guys are your big nature casters. You get nature 4 with Strength of Gaia for easily casting things like Army of Regeneration, Serpent's Blessing, or Relief. If you get a water random, then you have another way of easily accessing foul vapors, and the earth randoms can cast big earth spells as well. If you get lucky and get a death random, then you've got a lot of nice cross paths that you can use for forging and summoning. These shamans are very important for making sure that you have the buffing paths available for your armies so you can cast those really good army buffing spells. Okay, let's move on to the underwater fortresses. So if you built an underwater fort, then you can get more Kululus. These guys are kind of like your other commanders, except they don't wear boots as they don't have feet. So first of all, you have a basic commander, the Kulullu commander. He's got leadership of 50. He's aquatic, so he can't leave the sea. Basically, he's just there to ferry around troops underwater, but he's in no way special at all. Next, you have the Kulullu King. The Kulullu Kings are Holy 2, Water 1 mages with 100 leadership. So these guys are actually quite useful for being able to get access to formations. If you really need them above the ground, you can always make Amulet of the Fish for them, so they can get up above ground to help lead your armies. Just be prepared for them to be absolutely useless in combat. While they're under the water, however, seeing as they are Water 1 mages, they have access to summon water power, so they become Water 2s, which is quite nice for some buffing spells for your underwater troops, with some extra water gems, or for summoning things like water elementals. Now, Kulullu Sages are probably the reason you want to go underwater. They're Water 2 mages with an 100% chance for +1 in air, water, astral, or nature. They are, however, also adept researchers, giving you +4 research points for them in a turn. This makes them very efficient researchers in terms of recruitment turns, but they aren't sacred, so the upkeep will pile up pretty quick. A combination of these guys in Gala can really make it so you're getting a lot of research points per turn, where you're using your sages to boost your research points up quickly, while your Galas are a much slower burn with barely any upkeep cost. Do bear in mind that with their random path access as well, they're one of the only astral accesses you get for the nation. So you could potentially do communions with them underwater or above ground for a big investment of gems to counter the aquatic nature of them, but they're very effective spellcasters underwater either way. He also wears a hat. It's a terrible one, but hey, at least the learned guy knows what's up. Moving on to the Kulullu Queen. or sorry, the Kulitu Queen. Obviously they decided to change the name for this one, so it's not Kulullu, just to annoy me. But the Kulitu Queen is a Water 1, Nature 1, Holy 2 mage with an 100% chance of getting +1 to air, water, astral or nature with 50 leadership. Decent enough paths with potential astral access as well. You can give an astral lady a tree lord staff and suddenly you've got moonvine bracelet production going on an astral random. Another way to boost up nature, which is very useful on this nation. The other paths aren't quite as useful, but they do give you more cross paths, so they're always nice, and these guys also make pretty good casters due to not wearing armor. No armor encumbrance, no additional fatigue from that, which is quite nice. Okay, so that's your recruitment for Erm. You've got a very varied roster with a lot of unforted recruitment as well as underwater recruitment. This gives you a lot of options during gameplay. What you want to recruit is based on who you're fighting, but armies of front lines with standard of your basic troops, supported by your Enkidu archers with quite a lot of mage support from things like your Gudus and your Ishibs, will be very effective. You can also then support those frontline troops with stealthy raiders attacking your backlines through your swamp recruitment. You also have some pretty good summons, so first of all we'll go over the Buffalo. So the Buffalo is a Nature 2 ritual that costs 8 gems for 5+ buffaloes at Conjuration 3. These guys are size 6 tramplers with a good stack of HP and 2 attacks in addition. They're also berserkers, so berserking tramplers are very, very good. This does also help their bad protection, but it does put their defense skill into the dirt. These are fairly good for fairly gem cheap supplements to your armies. You also have access to Beastmaster on some of your commanders to boost up their pretty decent morale, just to make sure that they don't trample through your own lines. Potentially with some group stone skins or bark skin to bump up their awful protection, these guys could be quite scary. Moving on next, you have access to the Kusarakiku. These guys are spear wielding summons that you get through an Earth 1 ritual for 4 Earth gems that summons 2 of them at Conjuration level 4. They're sacred with 2 attacks, one of which is a length 3 spear that does decently high damage and is innately magical, but also can halt demons by paralyzing them. They're also bodyguards with spirit sight and patroller, though they are magical beings so they need to be led by a mage. They're okay, but they're fairly expensive in terms of mage turns for what you get, but they are good if you're against someone like Lanka or somebody else that uses a lot of demons. Moving on, the Ugallu are air mage commanders summoned at Conjuration 5 needing air 3 for 24 air gems. They're storm immune flyers with high inbuilt shock resistance, and they also come with air level 3 as a magical path. They have 3 attacks that do decent damage, and they are also sacred. These guys are powerful air casters with the ability to use storms and good air elemental summons. As they're flyers, they have good map move innately, and they can additionally magic attack phase with things like Cloud Trapeze. Using Mist Form and Arrow Shield with some additional equipment that you forged, they can be fairly effective thugs too, able to easily hit your enemy's backlines. Now, the Anzu are massive eagles with a head of a lion that breathe fire and water, and you can summon them with the Call Anzu spell at Conjuration 7 using a Water 2, Earth 2 ritual for 4 water gems for 2 of them. They have 3 inbuilt attacks and 2 different breath attacks that all do magical damage, which is excellent. They're also size 9 with very good hit points and innate flying and storm immunity. On top of that, they're also fire resistant and shock resistant. They're quite scary backline attackers, and though you don't get many of them per cast, they are quite effective and actually fairly cheap for the fact that you're only using 4 water gems for 2 of them. Next we'll go on to contact Scorpion Man, so that requires Fire 1 Earth 1 for 12 Earth gems at Conjuration 8. This summons you a Scorpion Man unit that has 3 melee attacks as well as a Plague Bow and also a Gaze of Fear that causes fear at a 40 square range and an AoE of 5. They also have inbuilt fear as well, and they are sacred and they have fire resistance and poison resistance. They've also got pretty decent protection. They're very expensive for 1, but they're also pretty good in terms of just a unit that you can send at the enemy. Whether or not they're worth 12 gems is up to you. Also, it's quite difficult to summon these guys as you have no innate access to fire. Finally, for summons, we have the Umu-apkallu, which you summon with the Umu-apkallu at Astral 5 for 60 Astral Pearls at Conjuration level 8. It's very expensive, but you do get a very good mage for this. They have level 3 air and water, level 2 earth, astral level 4, and nature and holy level 2. That's a lot of cross paths and a decent level 2 for most of them. They're also flying with inbuilt shock and cold resistance. They are also disease healers, adept researchers, and also inspiring research. So they'll improve the research of other units in the same province, and they're also sacred. These guys are quite scary late game mages. They are expensive, but they do give you access to astral, which you otherwise don't get easily at high levels, and getting anti-magic for the late game with our astral pass is very, very useful. Okay, so we're nearly done with the unit overview. In addition to all of the other units, there are also 3 heroes that you can get as The first is the Entu of the Moon. They have Water 1, Earth 1, and Astral and Holy level 3. This is another way into Astral, and with 2 Astral boosters, the only way other than your god in order to use the spell Umu-apkallu. They're a very good mage, but you want to keep her safe if the whole idea behind her is to get apkallu. The next hero we have is Favored of the Enki, which is an immortal Nature 3 Holy 2 mage. A very good mage with a good path. They're able to get howls off, and they're also immortal, so they're pretty safe until you get into enemies that are using things like Soul Slay. But even then, with 18 magic resist, if you gave them some magic resist gear, you'd probably actually be pretty safe for it unless they're absolutely spamming it. Finally for heroes, we have the Ugallu, which is different from the Ugallu, honestly. These naming conventions, I've got to say. They're a Water 4, Earth 3, Nature 2, Holy 3 mage with Inspiring and Adept Research. They don't fly like the Ugallu, but they are amphibious and also a high water caster, making it very easy for them to boost up to some things like Elemental Queens in water if you desire to, or just to cast a lot of bone melting. He's also a pretty good leader, and can be used for getting some great buffs on your troops. Just be careful on him, because unlike the Favourite of Enki, he isn't immortal. Okay, now that was a very long troop and commander overview. I'll blame the fact that has such a good selection of troops and commanders that they can recruit. I think what we'll do is we'll stop this part of the nation overview here, and we'll create a second part where we'll go over things like magic and pretender design, as well as what scales you probably want as Anyway, I hope this was helpful to you. Please leave a comment down below if there's any other nations you'd like me to cover. And until next time, take care.